Welcome to the tutorial for lesson number 4 of Celtic Christianity Online. This week we will take a look at the coming of Christianity to the Isles. Our exploration will unfold in two parts. Within the first section, we'll examine the Christian world around the time that they began coming to the Isles. Part 2, meanwhile, will focus in on the three principal Celtic saints, St. Patrick, St. Bridget, and St. Columba. We begin today by asking exactly when Christianity would have traveled to the Isles. We do know that it would have traveled along trade routes and military highways of the Roman Empire, perhaps as early as the 2nd century CE, but most certainly by the 3rd century. Pictured here is the Hindon St. Mary mosaic, an early Romano-British representation of Christ. This work is believed to be dated from around the 3rd century of the Common Era and demonstrates Christianity's existence within the Isles. In order to understand how the Roman Empire came to influence the Isles, specifically what we now know as Britain, we must go back a little bit farther in time. By 50 BCE, Julius Caesar's conquest of what is known as Gaul is complete, and the Roman Empire lays just across the channel from Britannia. Seen here are the military conquests and major battles of Julius Caesar. Note, the purple shaded area is the stretch of the Roman Empire at the time. During his Gallic Wars, Julius Caesar writes about a tribe in Gaul who refer to themselves as Celtae or Celts. This is the only indication we have of any people applying that specific name to themselves. Seen here is a coin minted after the conquest of Gaul. On the right, an image of Caesar's army, and on the left, possibly an image of a Vercingetorix, the conquered Gaelic warrior. It's interesting, however, that the Celtic speakers of Britannia, which is the Roman name for Britain, and Hibernia, or Ireland, never referred to themselves as Celts. It wasn't actually until British antiquarians of the 17th and 18th centuries identified a family of language spoken in the Isles as being Celtic that the term came to be used for the people of the Isles. Now, when Julius Caesar was writing about the Celts, in fact, this is the area he was speaking of. Notice that it's actually in continental Europe and not in the Isles at all. However, Julius Caesar did have contact with the Isles. We know that he made 2 forays into Britannia and forged some alliances with native tribes, but for various reasons did not remain. It wasn't then until 43 CE, under Roman Emperor Claudius, that Britannia became a Roman province. This extended roughly across 3/4 of Britain, and lasted until the withdrawal of the Roman legions in the first decade of the 5th century. During this time span, Christianity spread to the Isles. The first mention of a Christian in Britain, in fact, may be found in a reference to 3 British bishops who were present at the church council that took place in 314 CE, at what is present-day Arles, in France. Now, before the beginning of the 4th century, the relationship between Christianity and Imperial Rome was marked by periods of intense persecution of Christians. In fact, being a Christian was illegal within the Roman state. This changed in 313 CE, when Constantine signed the Decree of Toleration. The year later, the British bishops were free to participate in the council. Pictured here is an image of a statue in UK of Constantine the Great. By the mid-5th century, St. Patrick, a Romanized Briton from what is today Wales, or Cumbria in England, refers to the British bishops who approved his mission to convert the Irish. St. Patrick is commonly thought of as the individual who originally brought Christianity to the Isles. However, according to the Chronicle of St. Prosper, written in 431 CE, Pope Celestine sent Palladius as first bishop to the Irish who believe in Christ. Does the first bishop here indicate first in time, or in stature? As in many things within the study of history, there are many questions that arise. We'll revisit these questions in just a moment. But this quote does imply that there were already Christian communities living in Ireland before both Palladius and Patrick arrive. However, we know nothing about them. Scholars believe that Palladius may have been sent to counter Pelagianism. Pelagianism refers to a set of beliefs and practices among some Christians who were followers of Pelagius, which differed from the wider church on points of the relationship between human nature and God's grace. Unfortunately, we will be unable to delve into this matter in sufficient depth. If you'd like more information, Concordia does offer another online course in early Christian theology, which delves into these issues in great detail. For our purposes, Pelagianism is important as it does indicate that there has been a long discussion concerning exactly what it means to be Christian and how one should behave. I invite you to keep this in mind, as the idea of controversies and of this discussion will be revisited later on in the course concerning the Celtic Christian population. Palladius was sent to the Isles, which already had trade routes with the Roman Empire. Although both Ireland, or Hibernia, and Scotland, called Caledonia by the Romans, were never actually part of the Roman Empire. There was trade between peoples, and there was also slave raids which operated back and forth among the isles, via merchants and especially other travelers from Gaul and Britain, and even perhaps some Christian slaves procured from Britain by Irish raiders. Christianity moved through these slave routes, in and around the Isles. Pictured here is a Pictish boat. The cave itself is within Scotland, and Picti was the name that the Romans used for the people of eastern Scotland. The Picts did probably speak the Celtic language. One of the earliest British Christians we know of is Saint Alban. Pictured here is an image from the 13th century manuscript. Tradition tells us that Saint Alban, who flourished, represented here by FL, or was active in the 3rd and 4th century, along with his 3 companions, were beheaded by the Romans, and so became Britain's first Christian martyrs. The term martyr is used within early Christianity for someone who witnesses the faith. Later, the word transfers into the meaning of an individual who is willing to undergo great suffering or even to give their lives for their faith. This term will reoccur within Celtic Christianity as different types of martyrdoms. How we know about Saint Alban is in fact through writings produced centuries later, written by the Venerable Bede in his Ecclesiastical History of the English People. Although Saint Alban was active during the 3rd or 4th century, his tradition was only written down in the early 8th century. Although the Venerable Bede was a careful historian, his sources were so far removed from the historical, and so the text presents problems for an accurate historical look. Alban is also mentioned in other, later, hagiographical accounts. What we mean by the term hagiography is a spiritual biography of a saint, expressing the meaning of his or her life in the world of the writer, and for the purposes of inspiring the spiritual engagement of the audience. These are not biographies or literal histories, but stylized towards the meaning that the person's life brings to the community. As with all human endeavors, these noble ends were invariably mixed with others, be it ecclesiastical, political, or even economic. Turning now to another saint of this era, Saint Ninian, the apostle to the southern Picts. Once again, the exact details of Ninian's life are unclear. The first reference to him is in the works of Bede, and they are written as a vitae, much later, in the 12th and 17th centuries. Scholars believe that he lived in late 4th century and early 5th century, and his shrine is at Whithorn, in Latin Candida Casa, or White House. The name probably refers to the lime wash used to paint the building. In Galloway, southwestern Scotland. This is the area where his shrine is located. According to the tradition, Ninian named his monastery after the great Saint Martin of Tours, the Candida Sanctus. By some accounts, the two men actually met. Seen here is a stained glass window depicting Saint Martin sharing his cloak with a beggar. The work itself may be found in Cathédrale Saint-Marie de Bayonne in France. As a founder of one of the earliest monasteries in Western Europe, Saint Martin's influence will be felt in Celtic Christianity and can be seen in the many churches on the Isles named after him. This concludes part 1 of our lesson. We've already seen how there are many Christians who came before Patrick who will influence Celtic Christianity, as well as the fact that what happened at the time of Patrick and who exactly was the first to arrive to the Isles is unclear. I invite you to join me for part 2. The link is down in the description, and I'll see you in just a moment.